This is the Parents in Sport podcast. Amazing guests, honest conversations, topics that matter.
Welcome to season 2 of the Parents in Sport podcast. I am your host, Gordon MacLelland, and I'm delighted to be joined today by sports and exercise scientist and sports parent, Martha Lourey-Bird. Martha, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Now, Martha, great to have you on the show, and thank you for sharing your view of Sydney with me as we're still in lockdown in the UK. Can you tell our listeners a little bit about your background, particularly around the topic that we're talking about today, around girls and women in sport?
Yes, certainly. Well, I was obviously a girl in sport myself, having grown up in sport my whole life, as I know most of your guests are the same, where, you know, we live and breathe sport, and I'm certainly that type of person. So much so that I actually did a sports science degree, and then I did my master's in sports science as well. So I've always been really interested in that particular area. And then I happened to be working in that area my whole career, actually, which I'll get to in a second. But I actually married an athlete, and I've somehow produced 2 athletes of my own, one a son and one a daughter. And that's what really got me, I guess, really interested in this girls in sport area, because I saw how girls' experience of sport is so different to boys, and I also saw the number of girls that drop out of sport. So that was sort of from a professional point of view, and from a personal point of view, and then professionally, I happened to be doing so much work in women's health, and time and time again I came across adult women that had really negative experiences of exercise as a child, and it really affected their lifelong association with exercise in a negative way. So I sort of thought, well, look, what if I could really tailor some of my work to help everyone, so that those experiences that you have, particularly as a female, of sport when you're young, are really positive experiences. And that's a lot of the work that I'm doing now.
Yeah, fantastic. And you know, you've already touched on it there. I think for lots of us that this is very much a learning journey, and I know my own experiences of having a son and a daughter, and I'm very much at the moment working on trial and error, trying things that I would have coached lots of boys, because my coaching generally has been coaching around sort of males and male sport, and then what I've done with my older son, and then trying to translate it into how I approach sport with my daughter. And I've already learned very quickly, I do have to say, directed by her on occasions, about how this may not necessarily be the right approach, even though she's only 9. So I have adapted.
I love it. I love it. Look, there is a quote from a football coach of females here in Australia, and who has eloquently said, male players need to perform to be accepted. Female players need to be accepted before they perform. And really, as we'll learn over this podcast, it's in some ways actually, you sometimes need an opposite approach with girls to what you do with boys. And so hopefully we can explore some of that in our podcast today.
Yeah, so going back to the very beginning, so obviously lots of us want to involve our children in sport, and sons and daughters. What do you see, and obviously this will apply to some boys as well, what do you see as the sort of major benefits? You know, parents listening, a bit unsure about taking their daughters off to local clubs, getting them involved. What are the major benefits of getting our daughters involved into sport at a young age?
So many benefits, actually. I mean, whether it's, on an individual level or a larger societal level, but certainly on an individual level, the mental, physical and social benefits have been very well documented in the sports science. And also leadership in sport has been associated with many mental, educational, social and career benefits. So even studies that show that girls that do a lot of sport tend to be able to focus better academically. So I think it's a mistake for parents to think that, oh, look, if I put my daughter in sport, she's not going to be able to have time to focus on her studies, or it may affect her negatively academically. In fact, the research shows it can actually affect them positively. And we do find that athletes across the board that have less time tend to procrastinate less, tend to have better time management skills, and get their study done quicker. On a larger scale, there are so many benefits, social benefits and community benefits to having girls involved in sport. And so it should be something that we're really proactively trying to address, because we do know that by the time girls are teenagers, they're dropping out of sport, certainly in Australia, twice as much as teenage boys are. So that's something that we really need to be proactive about. We need to take a good hard look at ourselves as parents and sporting associations and coaches, and think, what can we do differently?
Yeah, so when we first involved them in sport, you would hope that parents have signed them up for sport for those benefits that you're talking about. You know, some of the skills that they will learn, some of the benefits that we'll have, you know, physically and mentally. You're going to tell me that there's a trap if we become too performance-based too early, are you? Is that a fair statement? If we put them in and become driven by their outcomes, that could slightly backfire? Or is that an unfair statement?
Oh, no, I think that's a correct statement. Like, I think it's actually a fair statement across the board, but particularly what we're finding with girls is that the focus on fun and friendship and socialization is just so much bigger than with boys, and that their emphasis on having fun, particularly in those first few sessions, is actually more important for them. So little techniques, you know, like having music, having time at the beginning for the girls to actually talk at the beginning and socialize, because that's why they're there, and actually allowing that time within your training session, so that it's not all serious and all about performance and all about competition, because then they're not going to keep coming back. They're coming to sport many cases for different reasons than what the boys are.
Yeah, I've sort of got first-hand experience of that, because I've said to my wife a couple of times when watching sessions, and with my coach's hat on as opposed to my parents' hat, I have turned an odd time and said, I don't quite understand why we're here watching this really, or giving up the time. And my wife has become very good at saying to me, but you don't understand, your daughter is enjoying it, and just look, it's all about the social for her. And it took a huge amount of time for me to sort of get my head around this, because I was like, well, it just has to be really productive, otherwise what's the point in doing it? And every minute needs to be used really well, and everything else. And actually, she was just really happy, and was happy stood at the back of a line having a quick chat with the other girls in the group, and then having her go. It's strange though.
Absolutely. And look, you know what? Then she'd probably stick with it and have a positive lifelong association with exercise. And isn't that actually what we're trying to achieve? Certainly from a much bigger scale, even from a health prevention and treatment scale, if we got more women doing that. But look, I know myself, I've been very involved in different roles within sport, and I have coached my daughter's netball team for a few years. I don't anymore. She's nearly 15 now. She's sort of outgrown what I can teach her. But I did find, I mean, a great example of it, it was every single year, once they went from that, I'm not sure what you call it there, but here we sort of call it netters or net set go. It was the non-competition that you do up to age 10. And once it got to 10, you had to be graded. Well, we would have a 50% drop off, because the girls didn't want to be graded. They wanted to play and stay with their friendship group and continue to play netball. But there was no opportunity for that. It was like, right, you're 10, you have to go and be graded from A through to M, or however many grades there might have been at the time. And that was such a turn off. So that's a case in point with your daughter. You know, if these girls are at the back of the line having a good old chat and having fun and thought it was the best hour of their week, then that in itself is reason enough to just keep doing it. And I feel there should be more opportunities to enable that, and not always feed into this competitive pathway, because that is not going to suit so many girls.
Yeah, I think we've all got a big responsibility with the sports programs that we run, and I guess as a sports parent, to understand, you know, why our children are playing in the first place, and why they are competing. And I think it is important that we offer different strands within our sporting organisations for what people are trying to achieve, because the reality of society is that some will get to 10 and will love the competition element and may want to be graded and
Absolutely.
go down a performance pathway. But there is also a large number who, as you say, will just want to continue playing the sport. And actually, surely our duty of care, I guess, is to ensure that we have still got adults or children who progress to being adults who are still involved in sport, you know, at whatever level that may be. Because that's going to be the bedrock of our communities, that they're more likely to volunteer their time to help the next generation come through. So there's a much wider picture involved in this, isn't there?
There is, definitely, but it's changing things up. It's not sticking to what we've always done. It's being prepared to go, hold on a minute, we're losing girls. What can we do differently? And start addressing some of those reasons for why these girls are dropping out. And we know, I mean, there's a whole list why they're dropping out in droves, particularly as teenagers, and competition is definitely one of them. But if you like, I can go through a whole load of other reasons why.
Yeah, go on. Yeah, I think it's, it's interesting, because I think, we set out our children, we want them to enjoy it, we want them to be playing, and we want them to continue playing. So I guess from a parental point of view, what is it that's going to, get to that stage where the children come to us and say, do you know what, I don't really want to do this anymore. What are we looking out for?
Yeah, so that one we were just talking about it being too competitive is definitely one of them. So if your child is saying they don't want to do it for that reason, find them something more social, find them something fun. And that, I think, is fantastic, to keep them physically active, meeting friends. It's better for health mentally, physically, and from a concentration point of view, as I mentioned. But also, I think, one of the top reasons, and I'm sure this applies to boys as well, but definitely with girls, is the suitable coaching. That authoritarian style of coaching is just not going to cut it for a girl. And more, we need to be asking girls, what do you actually want from your coach? What do you want from your sport? And they will tell you those answers. And they want a mentor. They want friendship. They want supportive coaching. Another thing that we're finding as well is how female-friendly are the facilities? Are the change rooms accessible to girls? Is the environment female-friendly? That's a big thing for teenage girls who they have less time available because they're doing more study, they possibly have a job, a relationship, a social life. So if the sport doesn't then therefore meet their expectations, even in terms of having somewhere to get changed before going, after doing sport and then going out, having mirrors, having basic things like that, then you can lose them for that. Those role models, girls need female role models in sport. They need to see that there are women doing sport. They need to see female coaches. They need to see female referees and umpires and CEOs of sporting organisations, and staff need to be females. And that, you can be it if you can see it. And if they can't see it, it's really hard for them to visualize that when we have this huge underrepresentation across sport and that lack of equity, particularly as they start becoming teenagers. There's things like compounding issues, whether it's the cost, it's the injuries, or their particular friends no longer participating. So these are some of the reasons. I mean, we could spend a whole podcast actually looking at the reasons why they drop out. But I guess for parents and coaches listening, the best thing you can do is ask the girls. And we find this time and time again, really interesting feedback when we do ask the girls. So just 2 points on that. One is that the person asking the girls needs to be someone that's not a selector. So not someone that's going to influence their choice in a team or not, someone that they can really trust and look up to, and ask for their feedback about how they can make it more female friendly. And the second thing was, I just wanted to give you a really interesting example when you do ask the girls at how simple the feedback might be to adjust. So with the Surf Life Saving Association in Australia, which is very, very huge here, that the sport of, all the beach sports and everything, their boys and girls do it. And they ask the girls, well, how can we support you more? And the two things that came out of it very simple changes. One was, could the change room door open up a different way? Because when we open the door, the boys can see us and the people walking past can see us getting changed. And they felt really uncomfortable about that. And you've got to get changed because you've got to put your swimsuit on. So that was such a barrier to teenage girls. And another one was, when we go to carnivals, you always set up the tent down the boys' end. So therefore, we've got to carry all our equipment down to the other end of the beach, A, and B, there's no one there to watch us. Such reasonable requests. Like, these are not unreasonable. So I think the more as parents and coaches we can have conversations in a non-threatening way with girls that we've developed trust with, the more we'll get insight into some really great things that we can adjust to accommodate them and keep them in sport for longer.
Yeah, I think that's across both sexes as well, this recognition that it's really good to give the children a voice, in the process and manage those conversations. Well, I know we talk in parents' workshops, a number of different questions at key points on the journey that actually just ask your children. And it's amazing how many have never had that dialogue or have never actually even thought about just asking. They probably sort of have asked it, but not really given the child that opportunity to really respond properly because they've got their own views on, what the answer should be. And then we sort of tend to carry on and go about it as we see.
And it's so different now. Like, when I was doing sport, there were basically two sports for me, one in winter and one in summer. And I did netball in winter and I did athletics in summer, and that was it. Girls today have a plethora of options. If that doesn't work, they'll go to something else or drop out. So sports, I think, need to work harder to retain our girls. And that's why they do need to be having those conversations. They do need to be looking at, how are we welcoming the girls? How is this setting making them and their parents feel welcome to bring their daughter along? Am I buddying them up with someone so they don't feel left out, because that friendship and that bond is so important for girls. So there is ways to, help curb this dropout by having those conversations and then taking action.
Do you think at the very beginning, when we involve our children in sport, that what does the science tell us or the data tell us around whether girls should go into all girls programs or maybe mixed programs to start with? And when do you think it becomes more important for them that it becomes a girls only activity? My daughter, for example, at the moment over here, she plays football with the boys still and can continue to do so until she's 12. And she enjoys that aspect of it. What are your thoughts on that? I mean, what do you think parents should be thinking about around that?
Yeah, I think that it's similar here, that the age is similar here when they have to go into girls only sports or boys only sports around that 12, 13 age. And I think that's appropriate. It's appropriate for girls also, because what we're finding is that's when they become very self-conscious about their body image. And the research does show us that they are more relaxed when they're only around girls, and they do tend to have a bit more of a go when they're not being watched by boys, and they don't have to be self-conscious about what they're wearing or how they look if they mess it up. So I actually think that those guidelines, which probably originated from the fact of safety, and the fact that the boys are just so much bigger at 13 or whatever it may be, that those rules probably originated from more of a body shape and a physicality point of view. But I think from a whole other points of view, that's actually appropriate. And girls like being with girls then. It's friendship, it's fun. I mean, my daughter's sport is her social life. She absolutely loves it. And they are her friends.
Yeah.
And that's so healthy as well, to have friendship groups, particularly for girls when high school can get very complicated, to have those friendship groups outside school. So whether it is in any other pursuit that your daughter does, have those different friendship groups. So whether the school group's got drama and then the girl can escape to the sporting group, or can escape to another sort of group where they can relax and be with a different group of friends, I think is just so healthy. And I think that is an appropriate age to be doing that.
Yeah, just going back to the conversation you're having, I love the phrase, be it if you can see it. I just think that's absolutely brilliant, by the way. I think that's a really good phrase. I sense that we are making some progress around women in sport in terms of maybe what we see on the TV now. Some of the marketing has certainly become more inclusive towards women. It's been great to see. I think last weekend we had the first female official in the Super Bowl final as well, for example. So we're certainly taking those positive steps. I'm guessing we've got a long, long way to go on this. We're just at the sort of bottom of the journey, are we?
Huge way to go, but I don't want to discredit what's being done because I think it's fantastic. But across all areas of sport, there's massive gender inequity, whether it's the players, whether it's the officials, the leaders of sport, the CEOs, even the sports science studies are predominantly, without a doubt, done on male athletes. I mean, we're only starting to even consider looking at the effects of menstruation on elite female athletes, which is just extraordinary that this sort of research has never been done before. So we have so far to go to equalise, but it's on everyone's agenda. People are talking about it. I've been to, forums and discussions across all sorts of sports in Australia about how we can bridge that gap. And I guess the ultimate aim is that we're not talking about women's sport, we're just talking about sport. Then we know that we've equalised it. But at the moment it's sport and it's women's sport. So yes, there is quite a way to go, but I think it's fantastic what we're seeing. I'm so excited. I would never have thought, when I was at university doing sports science that, I remember having discussions about, how we could do it. It was like a pipe dream what we're seeing today. But we have netball on television here that the girls are able to watch. And then we come back to this, they can see it. They can see the Diamonds playing and so it's not just watching the football on the weekend. They can watch the netball as well. So it's extraordinary what's happening. I'm hoping COVID hasn't derailed it too much because obviously it does require funds and it does require it to be a priority. And I do feel that possibly COVID has derailed some of it and derailed some of people's priorities, but hopefully we can get back on track across all sports because it was really high on the agenda of all sports.
Yeah, there's definitely been a greater exposure on the TV, hasn't there? I think over here that, we're able to watch some of the women's football matches. We are able to watch netball. We're able to watch women's cricket. Tomorrow night over here is the final of the Women's Basketball League. And slightly linked to this podcast, one of our earlier episodes, we had the coach of the Sevenoaks Suns, Len Bush. His team are in the final tomorrow, and his daughter is actually playing, and he coached her from a very young age, and he's now got her as a professional athlete as well. And there were some fascinating stories from him over the years where it was a real challenge for him. He was very strong. He's an American, very much based on their cultures of basketball in the US. And he remembers having to go home numerous times, and he used to have to take the coach's hat off, and he used to have to say to his daughter, "What has that stupid coach done today that's upset you so much?" And he had to have this dialogue, and it's a great conversation. I mean, I said to him, I wouldn't be too hard on yourself because she's still playing and she's still there, but
exactly.
You can just imagine some of the dialogue over the years.
Oh, look, it's so interesting. But look, I mean, it is interesting. Every child is different. I mean, whether they're a male or a female, every child is different. But certainly with my two, my eldest is a male and then my daughter, and they're both high performance in their sport, the way I relate to both of them is completely different. And it's not always because, of course, of their gender, it's their personality as well. So I think you've got that thrown in also. So it'll be interesting for you as your daughter gets into the teenage years, how you go with those different hats and those discussions. I'm sure she'll tell you what she needs.
Yeah, I mean, she is very funny because obviously she lived the first few years of taking our son off to sport, and as the younger sibling, she always had to sit in the car and go because you know, we all went, whereas
Yep.
now we obviously go in different directions. And I still remember, and I always say to parents, one of the things I've always struggled with is the car journey home. You know, I could have gone into therapy for the car journey home. I think back 6 or 7 years when I set off with my son, and it was just awful. And I've tried 4 or 5 different things. We've got something now, you'll be pleased to know, that works really well for both of us. But it took an awful lot of practice, trying new ideas, working with him on it. And obviously my daughter saw some of these, including some of the
Yes.
really bad ones where I just couldn't cope with what I'd watched, which is ridiculous when you're watching a 7-year-old, you know, play sport. And when I took her and I said, oh, Daddy's going to take you, you know, tonight to football. And, you know, you could tell she was excited that Daddy was going, and we had a chat. And she turned to me and she said, yes, Daddy, but we don't want any car bossing, but I'll take a few tips. So it was clearly very much based around the fact that, no, you're not going to get me in and tell me what I should be doing, but I'm happy if you put it in the correct way that might help me improve, and we have a nice dialogue about it. And she still says it now. Even though I haven't done it for years, it's amazing how it sticks. She says, and no car bossing, Daddy.
Well, it's amazing. I mean, we have this thing where my daughter just wants to play music in the car. So we don't talk about it. We just play music, and it's just fantastic. And she'll sing, and that's her thing. She'll sing on the way there. She just wants to listen to her music. The last sort of 15 minutes, she'll get in the zone. On the way back, we just turn the music on and we just drive away, and we don't even talk about it until later, which has just been fantastic for both of us. My husband's actually fantastic support. I mean, he, as I said, he's an ex-athlete. He played rugby. He's so calm, and that has been an amazing influence, you know, on our sporting family. And he did coach my son, and you know, we saw all sorts of weird and wonderful things in child sport at the time. But I think his really calm approach to everything has been a real benefit to the kids, actually, real benefit, and me. Just him, you know, I normally end up, it's not deliberate, but just because they're both normally needing to be in the same place different places at the same time, he'll often end up taking my son, who was sort of from the age of 16. I was thinking, my son probably doesn't want his mum giving him little tips on the side time. It's probably better for Dad to go, and I'll go with my daughter. And so we would sort of divide and conquer. And one time my husband had to take my daughter to athletics, which was very unusual because athletics was my background. And she said to me, oh, you wouldn't believe the talk that Dad gave me before high jump. And I said, what? And he said, well, see that pole there? Just jump over it. And that was the extent of the talk.
Yeah.
And then one other time he had to take her away. We had to go quite a way. They had to go on a plane, actually, for a trial for her. So it wasn't competition. She hadn't made the team. It was a state trial. And she was in a state that Dad was taking her and not Mum. And when I got to the bottom of it, it was because she didn't think Dad would be able to do the right hairstyle. So you may not have got to that, but it's so often about the hair.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I don't doubt that. I mean, was your husband always calm at the beginning, or have you been able to help him with that in those early stages? How was he at the very start? Because obviously that transition out of sort of performance sport and those environments we've been in, it's very difficult to not try and translate some of that onto the youth sports experience, because that's what lots of people get wrong. We try to take the professional game into kids sport and some of the approaches, and actually it's a totally different beast, so it doesn't quite work. Was he always good, or were you quite good at just a few little nudges?
I can't take credit. I think he may not have been on the inside, Gordon, but he always showed it on the outside. But what he was like on the inside, I'm not quite sure. Because, I mean, my son was not so competitive when he was younger. I mean, I know he's done exceptionally well now, but he was sort of this slow burn, you know. So you can't really do anything but accept that at the time. So whether he was going crazy on the inside, I'm not sure. But, you know, I do remember one time when, my son's rugby team was kicking off and something happened, and then the other team had to kick and they didn't have a tee, and there was this big, kerfuffle sort of from the other team, and he went, well, just take our tee or just take the points. Like, it doesn't really matter. Yeah. So he did always project externally a calm exterior, but I'm going to ask him when I get off this, because maybe he was boiling inside, and that might be what all the grey hair's for.
But yeah, I've got plenty of those now as well. Absolutely. Do you think parents need to be aware? I know you said obviously you took your daughter sometimes. He started to take your son from the age of 16. How do you think the children perceive that at a young age? I mean, my wife does have to check me a few times, and she will say, just so you know, you haven't watched your daughter play for 3 weeks because I've gone with the son. And maybe that's just a subconscious thing, that I feel more comfortable in my son's environment, as opposed to, not because I prefer my son to my daughter, but it's a sort of choice that I subconsciously make. And then obviously I try to correct it. Obviously it's going to be different for different people. I'm guessing we're saying that you should just try and share it out as much as you can, aren't we?
Well, we have the conversation. I think it's really important to have the conversation with the child all the time and just discuss the logistics of it. And it is really difficult if they're both doing sport at a high level. I have found that all of us went and watched my son. We all went and watched my son, because my daughter's 4 years younger. Yeah. You know, so wherever he was, we'd all fly, and that was our family holiday, and we would watch him. But now that she's doing the exact same things he was, it's only me, because quite often my son either has another sporting commitment somewhere else that my husband goes to. But what I find I do now with her is I'll video it, or I'll FaceTime them, and I'll actually have that on so that wherever they are, they can watch her games, and then they can watch her that way and give her feedback that way. So I've done that a few times as well, just when it's physically impossible, and they're really important high-level games. And, you know, I feel like she deserves everyone at her games too, just like they were for my son. So technology is the answer quite often.
Yeah, and I think there what you're saying is it's really important, isn't it, that we try and do our best for all of our children, isn't it? When you go down one path with one, you can't then change the boundaries on the second one. I mean, we were exhausted after my son's early experiences in sport, and then you got to it. It would have been easy to say, "Oh no, you're okay. We'll maybe just not do as much." But actually, how can you justify that when you actually sit and have a dialogue about it? So off we ploughed again and going through it again. So now we're doubly tired.
Well, it's funny because I said, look, it's my fault, because I always said play outside. You know, being in Australia, I always said don't come in, and we live at the beach. So I'm like, there's plenty to do and be active. But I always joked, if we had a third, I just would have had to sit them in front of a screen. I'm sorry, couldn't do this 3 times. I don't know how parents do it for 3 or 4 children that are athletes. I really don't. You know, you're outnumbered there.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's some incredible commitment. I mean, shown by sports parents all around the world at whatever the level. When you actually look at what they manage to get through in a week and how they manage to organise their time and schedules. And I know in our parents' workshops, when we ask them what they do find the most challenging, often that logistics and cost and their impact on their own social lives. Very popular answers, and I think it's all about how it still comes back to bringing these conversations out into the open, doesn't it? Because we talked earlier about what coaches need to do to create these positive environments for girls. Well, actually, for coaches to have an understanding what parents are going through as well can only actually benefit that coach-parent relationship as well, because there's just a greater understanding of the background of the people that you're coaching, the athletes that you're working with.
I do. I think that's really important. But I think the other piece of that is the athlete themselves can take a lot of responsibility from being a teenager. And I guess that's what we learned with our son, is we took a lot of that responsibility for managing his schedule. But what I've done with my daughter is I've really encouraged her to take responsibility. It's her sport. It's her schedule. She needs to manage it. And she actually puts it up on a spreadsheet. She puts it up inside her wardrobe so I can see it. She sends me, and she has a copy on her laptop as well. And if I get an email that's just addressed to me about her sport, I send her the email as well, because it's her sport. It should not be coming to me. And I've pretty much done that from when she was 13, and I just went, you can own this as well. And then I feel it does really take some of the stress of it away, because I don't know if other parents like this, but I live in fear that they're actually going to forget something, or like not be at a place that they're supposed to be at, or I've taken them to the wrong spot, or hold on, which child was supposed to be where. And now I know that she's keeping a record of it as well. I've sort of encouraged her to, you tell me what it is that you have on this weekend, and I'll just cross-check it with what I've got in my diary. So that's how we tend to work. And I think it's really important that the child can take ownership from that, can schedule it, can tell you what they've got on, work out a way that, I know there's other apps that you can share it online on an app with families, but I feel it shouldn't just be coming from the parent the whole time. I do have a little story though, is that we did enter it all into an app last year, went through painstakingly hours and hours, and of course COVID and everything was cancelled. So the whole time during COVID, we were all getting pop-ups going, oh, we were supposed to be here for a trial today. Oh, we were supposed to be training. Oh, I was supposed to be away for that today. So it was teasing us. Yeah. So I'm not doing that again. They can do it themselves.
No, I think that piece around, we often talk to parents actually about how they view the sporting experience, that if they are viewing it as a vehicle to equip children with some amazing life skills, it will all have been worth it, because sport still remains one of the safest vehicles to equip themselves with things like resilience, determination, creativity, good communicators, self-organisation, like you say. And I think that what you've done there is a key skill. I mean, we tried it with our 9-year-old son, that he's always packed his bag for football. Now, we always worried, like you do, that you'd leave something and you would never let them turn up with the wrong kit. So we always checked it. But it was actually about going through the process of doing it, so that now it's just become part of his routine and he's got a far greater ownership of it. And I think that it's really important that we recognise that the sporting journey is our children's sporting journey, not just from a logistical point of view, but also the fact that they need to sort of manage it and drive the car. We've just created a new workshop for parents and children together virtually, and it's based around driving a Grand Prix. And the children are the drivers, and the parents put the headsets on and go in the pit lane. And we go through a myriad of different scenarios, but that's ultimately what we want here. We want, and particularly, talking about girls today, we want girls to get involved in sport. We want to be able to talk to them about why they're doing it, what their needs are, what their requirements are, what we can do to best support them. And then we want them to fly with it, don't we? We want them to say, this is really cool. I'm now going to own this. And we've probably done a really good job in those early stages of setting the tone for that.
Absolutely. And to have that conversation, like you said, where I say, look, this is your sport. These are your choices. This is what you want to do. So you need to be driving this, but tell me how I can best support you, of course. But it really needs to come from them. And I find that, I've always said to my kids, particularly with their high aspirations, if ever you change your mind, that's fine. Just let me know. But as long as you're working and doing what you want, I will support you 100% to help facilitate that. But if you ever change your mind, that's completely okay. Just let me know, and I'll sort of take my foot off the accelerator as well. Because, as you know, it is such a team effort, particularly once you get to the pointy end of this high performance. It really does require all the coaches, not just one coach, but all the coaches, the parents, the family. I always say it takes a village to raise a child. Well, it takes several villages to raise an athlete. And it truly, truly, truly does. And the athlete needs to communicate and let everybody know, yep, I'm still on this path. I'm still focused. This is what I want. And I say, we're all in. We'll make it happen. But anytime you want to change your mind, that's absolutely fine. And how I can best support you is what you need to let me know. And I found that quite liberating, actually, because it might just be, I just need you to smile when I look at you. Oh, okay, great. Or can you not cross your arms when you're watching me? Because it makes me think that I've done something wrong. It might be that. I mean, it's just fascinating, the feedback you can get in how you can be most supportive.
Yeah, fantastic. And just conscious of the time, I think there was some lovely messages there in finishing off this podcast this morning. If people want to find out more about your work, Martha, and the work that you're doing, I know you've had some exciting things about to be published as well. Where can people find out more about your work?
Just on my website's probably the best starting point, because they can link from there and find me on Instagram, and there's my blog on the website. There's also a whole section on raising athletes with articles written to help support parents and coaches raising athletes. And I do have a few articles and blogs there written about girls. And I guess the one thing we haven't mentioned about girls that I just wanted to highlight was just the importance of uniforms for girls are so important. I just didn't want the podcast to finish without stressing how important it is. So please, anyone listening, please try and accommodate and talk to your girls about what they want to wear. They don't want to wear the boys' uniforms. They don't want to wear unisex uniforms. Ask them what they want to wear and what they feel most comfortable in, because when their body's changing, they become really self-conscious as teenagers. And we need to adjust and we need to modify. And we're looking at here in Australia that maybe the netball dress doesn't have to be the netball dress. And if they wanted to wear the same colours but in tights or leggings or shorts, then that's fine too. We need to be flexible. We need to modernise our approach to uniforms. And I think we'll get a lot more girls sticking with sport that way.
Martha, thank you. It's been an absolute privilege to have you on the show, sharing your experiences and your expertise in this particular field. We are very excited about potentially having you back later in the year to maybe do a webinar with us on what is such a huge topic, which we're only just starting to, I guess, scrape the barrel of. So Martha, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me and being interested in the area.
Thank you for listening. Check us out at parentsinsport.co.uk.